Good evening. We are on our Tuesday night medical Halacha share, and today we're continuing on from IVF and fertility treatments. We're continuing on to a subset of that, which is to do with genetic testing, and part of that is going to be relevant also to fertility treatment, art, to assisted reproductive technology, as we will see. We're going to do a couple of weeks here on genetic tests, diagnosis, and the various ramifications of those different tests. And a good place to start is the most obvious question before we get into the technology and the halachic implications of all these tests. The most obvious question which we should ask ourselves is it necessary? Is this something that we should even be doing? So what forms of genetic tests do we have? So let's just go through a couple of different, through a life cycle, if you want, of a pregnancy of a child. Let's sort of look at the different types of tests we have, and then we're going to start from the beginning. So the first type of test we have, what we call premarital testing. Premarital testing is what we call nowadays Dor Yeshorim, as an example of premarital testing, but it's not just Dor Yeshorim. There are other organizations in different countries. In England, there's different organizations. Cholim here covers a certain amount of tests. So Dor Yeshorim is what we call premarital testing. That's shidduchim, basically to decide if you should get married to the person or not, based on recessive genes. Okay. Let's say you've jumped through that hurdle, you are now married. Mazel tov. The next set of tests that a person could go through, what we will call preconception screening, preconception test. That is, before you want to have a kid, you want to screen yourself to see if you have any genetic, if either of the parents are carriers of a genetic disorder, whether it's recessive or not. So that is what we will call, again, preconception testing, and this is, again, what Cholim here classically covers. And again, in different places you can get different forms of testing. In the States, in England, the NHS covers certain tests. That's what we call preconception screening. Then you have, okay, now you are in the process. Let's say you're in the process of having a child, getting pregnant, having a child. So there are different tests that can happen within that sphere. So first of all, if a person knows that they are a carrier, what can be done, and we've just briefly mentioned this, and this is where it links on to our previous shiurim, is what you can do is what's known as PGD. PGD, which is pre-implementation genetic diagnosis, which means essentially you do IVF, you fertilize the eggs outside in the lab, and then at day 3 usually, or something around day 3 of the fertilized embryo, as it is splitting, you extract, you do a biopsy, you take a cell or a couple of cells out, and they get sent for diagnosis, a DNA diagnosis, to see whether that embryo is affected by whatever genetic condition before implant. And then you decide which of the embryos get implanted back. That's known as PGD, pre-implementation genetic diagnosis. So that's another form of testing. Next, let's say you went through that, you are pregnant, and you're not sure, something came up for whatever reason you want to test. So there's two types of tests that can be done then. One is called CVS. CVS, which stands for chorionic villus sampling, which means basically what happens in this test is that a biopsy is taken from the placenta of the embryo sitting inside the mother, and some cells are extracted, and those cells are sent to the lab for genetic testing to see the DNA, whether they are affected with whatever genetic condition you are testing for. So that usually happens around the third month-ish. That's when that type of testing happens. Let's say you've jumped through that test. Then the one test that we probably all heard of is what we call an amnio, right? Amniocentesis is when liquid is extracted from the amnio. The amnio liquid is extracted, and that is sent for testing. It's not actually extracting cells, therefore it is a bit more limited in what it can test for. It's also done much later. That's one of the other drawbacks, but it is slightly safer than what we call CVS. Okay? So that's the next batch of genetic testing. Okay, at that point, hopefully you are having a healthy baby. If not, that's what we're going to discuss a bit in the following weeks. Okay, and finally, when you finish with all of that, and you think you're finally finished, then hopefully, Mitzvah Hashem, all children should develop normally and correctly. But if there's some developmental, some issue afterwards, then you can have genetic tests afterwards to see whether the baby has any genetic conditions. Hopefully, no one ever has to deal with that. Okay, so that's the whole barrage, if you want, of all the genetic testing that's available. And what we're going to start with today is the most obvious one and deal with the hashkafic issues of whether this is even appropriate. Is this something we should even be doing? So the first one we start off with is Dor Yeshorim. Dor Yeshorim, and again, I'm just taking Dor Yeshorim as as the example. But obviously, as I said, there are other premarital systems out there, but Dor Yeshorim is the most common one that we all know about. Is this something that we should even be doing? What is the question?
What's Dor Yeshorim?
What?
It's an amutah?
Dor Yeshorim is an amutah, yes. It's an amutah both here and across the world that does, so again, I didn't realize you didn't know what Dor Yeshorim is. Dor Yeshorim is an amutah that basically does pre-marital testing. Everyone gets a number. It's totally confidential. Everyone gets a number. They do their tests. It's in a, hopefully, secure database system somewhere. For Tay-Sachs and for a whole barrage of different genetic conditions, yeah. It started with Tay-Sachs. That was the initial test was for Tay-Sachs, but then it expanded more and more. We'll discuss that in a second. And basically, it's only a test for recessive. So what happens if someone is in the midst of a shidduch and they want to know whether there's any clashes or any problems? The guy gives in his number to Dor Yeshorim, the girl gives her number, and all they say is it a good match or is it not a good match? They don't say anything else. So, no one really knows if they're a carrier. No one knows if they're a carrier of something. If it's not a good match, you know you're a carrier of something, but you don't know what.
They won't tell you?
They won't tell you.
That's kind of important to know.
I think so also. But that's their policy. That's their policy. One can agree or disagree with it, but that's their policy. So that's just how it is for Dor Yeshorim. There are other testings that are done through, as I mentioned, different services that will tell you the results. But we're going to discuss that in a second. Is this something that should be done or not? And the same question applies for all the other forms of genetic testing. Before we even get into the halachic ramifications for a second, which we're going to do starting next week, is this something that we should even delve into? Yes or no? So if you look in the phones that you have in front of you, the first Gemara that we're going to explore is the Gemara in Yevamos. So the Gemara in Yevamos tells us, I'm just going to jump around on my laptop here. The Gemara in Yevamos Samach Daled Amud Beis tells us a story of four sisters from Tzipori in the Gelo, four sisters in Tzipori that Maseh ba'arba chayos b'Tzipori, Shamala Rishona Umeis, that the first one did bris milah on her son and the son died. Shnia, the second sister, did bris milah on the son and he died. Shlishis umeis. Revius, the fourth one, finally came to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel and he said to her, Al Tamuli, actually for whatever reason I erased that word, he said to her, don't do bris milah. It's a danger. Okay, so the Gemara then says, why 4 times, why 3 times, sakana, whatever the number is, the Gemara discusses it. And then the Gemara says, you see from here that when you're dealing with a medical condition, that it's a sakana to do bris milah for. Now, what condition are we talking about here? Hemophilia. Clearly, we're talking about hemophilia, or at least it's some form of similar condition to hemophilia. So when you're talking about, you see here, the achayus mechaskos. This is something which is a genetic condition that if you want to know a chazaka whether it's sakana, you look at the extended family, you include the aunts. So if you look at a tree, which is what genetic counselors do nowadays, they look at the expanded tree to see whether there's conditions across the family that might be an issue here. So you see from here, the achayis mechaskos, says the Gemara. Amarava. So this is an important statement. Now that you say that we look at the family tree to see whether there's a sakana here, whether there's a chazaka, there's a real pattern of sakana here, therefore, lo yisa adam isha. A person should be careful not to marry somebody. Lo mishpachas nichbin, v'lo mishpachas mitzoraim. Be careful not to marry somebody who has some sort of, without translating mitzoraim and nichbin, but basically make sure you marry someone who doesn't have a medical condition that could be an issue. That's basically what the Gemara says. Okay? As long as you have a real pattern here that you have a reason to be concerned, a person should be careful. So here we have the first place. This is the first place, the primary source in Shas, that you see that we are concerned, that a person should be concerned about the family he's marrying into, to make sure there's not going to be an issue here for the kid.
The case with Rabbi Shimon Gamliel had already happened.
Correct. But the Gemara continues and says, based on the fact that by bris milah and hemophilia, we look at the extended family to see whether there's a pattern. Based on that, a person should look at the extended family of who he's about to marry to make sure he's not going to have any issues. That's what the Gemara says. Okay. So therefore, that seems to be a very primary source that one should be concerned, and one should look, both sides I guess, one should look at the family to make sure one is not entering any genetic or any major issues within the family. Okay? Easy enough. So what does that mean? First of all, one could say, it says, Hu dis chazik latazimne. You only have to be concerned if you have a good reason to be concerned. That's what the Gemara says, right? Hu dis chazik latazimne. In other words, if you see a pattern in the family, okay, maybe you should ask questions. But does that mean one should look for problems? Which is what we're talking about here. So that you don't see from the Gemara. The Gemara is only talking about when you already see a pattern. Okay, then get checked. What about someone who doesn't see anything in his family? Do they have to get checked? So Rabbi Moshe was asked this question. We're going to look at two tshuvas here. Rabbi Moshe was asked this question. This is Igros Moshe Even Ezer Chelik Dalet Siman Yud. So Rabbi Moshe was asked this question exactly about Tay-Sachs testing. Because as you know, Tay-Sachs, at least for Ashkenazim, is the most common recessive genetic and most common fatal or serious genetic recessive disorder. Okay, so this is the one which unfortunately has killed many children. Many children have died from it. And this is the one where the testing really came out and why Dor Yeshorim was started as an organization. In England, for example, Tay-Sachs testing is free by the National Health Service. Anyone from Ashkenazi Jewish descent.
Yeah. What about for Goyim?
So I actually was reading an article today that I'm guessing due to intermarriage, that the Tay-Sachs is becoming more common amongst Goyim also, much less than Jews. Right. But so now it's being expanded also. Right. And I guess I'm assuming it's because of intermarriage, but I don't know.
I'm just saying because like in theory they have to be non-discriminational and non-discriminatory and
no, that's not true. I mean the different genetic conditions are based on race, are based on your gene pool. So I mean that is by definition it's a risk factor, right? I mean,
you're not going to check white people for sickle cell.
Right, exactly. If it's sickle cell anemia.
So a Sephardi Jew in England wants to just take Tay-Sachs.
So Dor Yeshorim has, if you go onto their website, Dor Yeshorim has three different sets of tests. One for Ashkenazim, one for Sephardim, because Sephardim have different genetic conditions. Some of them overlap, obviously, but they have different genetic conditions to test for. And then they have a third, which is optional. But they actually have different batteries for Ashkenazim and Sephardim. For exactly this reason.
Worldwide or just
it is worldwide. It's in Israel. The main places are Israel and United States, but it is worldwide. Okay, so Rabbi Moshe was basically asked this question in the 70s. Should someone proactively get tested when there's no reason for them really to get tested? So Iyanti Bezeh. So Rabbi Moshe writes, I'm just going to read this tshuva because it's a very important tshuva. Iyanti Bezeh. I looked into this. And this is what I think. Even though there's only a very small percentage, it's a minority, I think, Tay-Sachs carriers are 1 in the 40 something, which for genetic conditions is pretty high, but if you look at, relatively speaking, 1 in 45 or something like that, I don't remember. And then if you're looking at recessive on both sides, to take that 1 in 45, squared, right? So it's a very small percentage. Perhaps, and this is the important point, perhaps we should invoke the pasuk Tamim Tiyeh Hashem Elokecha. You have to have a certain element of trusting in Hashem. Tamim Tiyeh. Don't look for problems, right? Or Perish Rashi B'chum Hashem, like Rashi writes, Shekatav Hisalchim U'Mitmimus V'Tzatzapelo V'Lo Tachkor Achar Ktidus. Don't look into the future and don't try and delve and be a Obachacham, right? So if that's the case, so why should you look for problems? Mikol Makom, says Ramosha. Kivin Sha'at HaNes Ezeh B'Ofen Kal Livdok. Since it's so easy to make the test now, it's a simple blood test. Yesh Ladun. One can argue, She'em Eino Bodok Es Atzmo. If he doesn't test himself, Hu Kizgiras Ha'inayim Liros Ma She'efshar Liros. That's not Tamim Tiyeh Hashem Elokecha. Don't delve deeply. This is something which is so simple. It's right in front of your eyes. It's like you're going like this, shutting your eyes and not seeing a truck driving right at you. That's not Tamim Tiyeh Hashem Elokecha. That's being silly. Right? That's not Tamim. That's being silly. Because it's so easy. Umikivan, and since obviously, if the kid is going to die, it's a big tsar, it's a huge problem in the family. Therefore, a person should get tested. Practically, even though there's no history in the family. Okay. And then he writes, that people should know it. But he writes, this is where Dor Yeshorim got this from, obviously. The most important thing is to do this privately, quietly, secretively. That the word doesn't get out, oh, he's a carrier. Oh, she's a carrier. You can see what that would do, the havoc that would wreak on shidduchim. I mean, shidduchim is hard enough without that, right? And the doctor also actually has to follow HIPAA. He's not allowed to tell anybody. Even though if it's only one side of the carrier, not the other, nothing's going to happen, etc. People, the gossip will start going around, and that's the end of it. Therefore, it has to be done quietly. So says Ramosha, what is the argument against doing these tests? Why should you look into things that, mind your own business almost? Leave it up to Hashem. If you have a history, if you have something in the family to check, fine, check. But if you don't have anything to check based on, you have nothing to base yourself on checking or testing, then why delve into it? Says Ramosha, no. This is not in the category of Tamim Tiyeh Hashem Ekecha. This is not a matter of, I am so holy. I'm with Hashem. I trust in Hashem. This is a matter of, it's right in front of your eyes. It's so easy. This is something which is visible in front of you. And therefore, it's as if you have a truck driving right at you and you're closing your eyes in front of it. No, no, you're not allowed to do that. So everyone should get tested. That's what Ramosha writes. Now he's speaking about Tay-Sachs again, which is the highest percentage. Right.
Do you have any idea what percentage of people do it?
It's in the frum world, very high. Very, very high nowadays, yes. It's the generally accepted. I remember when I was in Shidduchim, not so long ago, there were many people I went out with. I personally did not do Dor Yeshorim, and I'll tell you why in a second. But there were many girls I went out with who beforehand they wanted to know that I'd done Dor Yeshorim. That's the Makubal thing already. They want to know beforehand to make sure that if you go out past a couple of dates, you can just send in the thing and they'll give you a response immediately. Good match, no match. You don't want to get engaged and then do the test, right? So almost everyone does it before they get engaged. Now, why did I not do it? So Dor Yeshorim has a policy, which, based on what Ramosha says, makes sense. They have a policy that if you already know your genetic condition, any of these, you cannot do Dor Yeshorim. Why? Because if it comes out negative, you go, I know what she has. Let's say you tested, and you tested positive for Chas v'Shalom, for CF, cystic fibrosis. And then you sent in your number you did the Dor Yeshorim, you sent a number, and the Dor Yeshorim comes out negative. It's not a good match. I now know that the girl I went out with is a carrier of cystic fibrosis. Because I have it, because I already knew what I had. So therefore they have that policy. Now, because I grew up in England, and Tay-Sachs is free testing in England, I did Tay-Sachs test in England. Before.
My parents were tested.
So therefore I couldn't do Dor Yeshorim.
My parents, they're not religious. They were tested in the 70s when I was a kid. Both came out not carriers.
Right.
So I never did any testing.
Right. Well, if both your parents are not carriers, then you don't have to worry about it, obviously. Right.
But before, I'll tell you, like you, Motty, I think even more than you, I got married when I was 39. I went out with a lot of girls. No one ever asked me about genetic testing.
So I think it's more makubal in yeshivish Haredi circles. It's less so in other circles, but I think it's becoming more so. It is gradually becoming the norm.
I was dating here too.
Yeah, here also. It's gradually becoming the norm. Over time, 15 years ago is a long time ago, or whatever it is.
13 years ago.
Whatever. It's a long time ago. Things have changed. It has become much more the norm. Okay, so that's Ramosha's tshuva. So again, don't think you're being so smart. Tamim Tiyeh, no, it's a normal thing, and it's a thing which is easy. You should do it. Rosh Sternbuch, number 3 here, also has a tshuva on the same thing, and he's speaking actually about something else. He starts off on a different topic, which is why I brought this in.
Time frame?
Rosh Sternbuch writes his tshuva. We're talking about in the 80s.
Okay, so after.
In the 80s, after Ramosha. I'm pretty sure it's in the 80s. Chelik Beis, I think so. It's in the 80s. And he's asks the same question, but his question is a bit further. What should a person who realizes that he might be a carrier and his wife is pregnant, should they do amnio? It's not clear. Or should they do the ultrasound? Should they do whatever it is? Should they do? Now, the reason he says you shouldn't do it, he brings two reasons you shouldn't do it. One is we're going to discuss next week and the week after, because according to him, you can't do abortions for this, and we're going to discuss abortions next week.
Well, there's a small risk with the amniocentesis.
There's a small risk
causing a spontaneous abortion.
Correct. There's 1% by amnio. CVS is 1 to 2%, which is slightly higher risk, which we'll get into also in 2 weeks probably. Okay, but so that's one thing. But the second thing he brings is really fascinating. V'shamati, he writes, B'shem Hagon Rav Yaakov Kanievsky. Anybody? The discipler. Svar mechudeshes. Another reason you shouldn't do this testing, and he's talking about within pregnancy to start off with, and then he goes to premarital. She'ein hispalal al ma'asen nesim. A person should not be mispalal for a nes. Okay, so Olafizeh, calls man shelo yadua hamatzav, because anytime that you don't know what's going on, you don't know whether the fetus is affected or not. So eshalam nitzpalal shisrape, then you can daven to say hopefully everything will be everything should be gesund, everything should be okay. So once you've been diagnosed, the baby is a carrier or the baby is affected with genetic condition X or Y, and then to make the kid better once you've diagnosed, that's mamash a nes already. Don't get tested. It's better you don't know. Because once you know, you have to daven for a nes to make it better. If you don't know, no nes necessary. You just daven for a refuah shalema.
Don't we have precedent that Leah daven never?
Oh, amazing. Okay, so this is what the discipler said. Now, before we jump any further, before we go back to premarital, this is actually a very important. Reb Chaim, his son. There's a huge machlokas going on, which has been going for a long time, whether women during pregnancy should go for their second trimester scan. Within many circles in Eretz Yisrael, Haredi circles, women do not go for ultrasounds during pregnancy. Based on this. Better not to know if there's an issue. Don't go. Don't be megal as an issue. What's the 20-week scan for? 20-week scan is to basically scan of all the internal organs to check if there are any defects or anything like that. So right, usually not. I mean, most people don't care at this point, or maybe they do. I don't know. But to know the sex of the baby, that's not the main reason for it, right? So the main reason is to find out if there are any defects. Screening for Down syndrome, all sorts of other things. So if that's the case, according to a disciple, don't do it. It's better not to know, basically. Once you know it's a problem, now to daven, that's davening for a nes. If you don't know, okay, you can daven. You can't do right. So that's what the disciple has said. Okay, so based on that, Reb Chaim says the same thing, if I'm not mistaken. This is what's quoted. And Reb Zilberstein, who is also one of the major medical poskim, he's the Rav of Ma'anei HaYeshuah in Bnei Brak, says the same thing. And he brings a couple of rayas that it's better to have bitachon, basically, and not diagnosed during pregnancy when there's nothing you can do about it anyway. Because we don't allow abortions. We're going to make that assumption for a second. Until next week. You can't do abortions anyway, so what's the point? And it's better not to know. And therefore, there are many people who do not go, many women in Israel, I don't know what it's like in the States, who do not go for ultrasounds and the 20-week scan. Now, this is a major problem. Now, just for a second, history. The disciple was nifted, just 1 second. The disciple was nifted in 1985 or 1986, I forget. I think it was 85. I think it was the first of the three. The discipler Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky and Rav Moshe were nifted within a year of each other. And Rav Moshe was 86, if I remember correctly. So I think it's 85. 85 is, how many years ago? 34 years ago. Medicine has changed a lot. We've discussed this a few weeks ago. It's very hard to learn from a tshuva from 30 whatever years ago to now. But that's what he said then. And that's based on that, as I said, Reb Chaim and Reb Zilberstein seem to say the same thing. Okay, why is that a problem? Because medicine has changed. Medicine has changed rapidly. One thing. Nowadays, let's say you do find something. Let's say you can't abort. But there are situations, there's a whole new field of medicine nowadays, which is called fetal medicine. What type of fetal medicine are we talking about? we're talking about, and let's see if I can actually say this correctly, intrauterine surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Intrauterine fetal surgery. Now, most people don't even know this exists. It's a very new field where certain types of surgery are done on the baby, on the fetus, while the baby's in the womb. Surgery is done. How? That you do not ask me. It's a whole new branch of medicine. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Because they're dealing with a body which is so small.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's very specialized, putting it mildly. Putting it mildly.
And to have a view to be able to adequately visualize.
And obviously it's only done in extremely high-risk conditions because obviously there is a risk of spontaneous abortion and things like that. So, but there's a whole new... So to say 35 years ago that didn't exist. So A, there is something you can do about it possibly. B, even if there wasn't that available for whatever condition or it's not, you can't do intrauterine fetal surgery. Even though it's not possible. If you know there's a problem, you can have at the ward, as the baby is born, a whole team from the NICU or whatever other department has to be there ready. I have someone in my family who gave birth to a baby with protruding intestine. The baby was born with intestine sticking out. Okay? From what I read, these are the type of things you don't know until you actually work in this, and I don't work in this. But from what I read, it's actually not that uncommon, relatively speaking. So because it was diagnosed in the 2-week scan, so they had, as the baby, she delivered in a special, in a very high-risk unit in a special hospital, and everyone was there. The NICU was there, and the baby was rushed straight to surgery, and everything was great. So Rav Asher Weiss has a tshuva on this, and he writes how he got a letter from one of the heads of the departments of Shari Tzedek, I think maybe of the NICU in Shari Tzedek, how the babies have died because the mothers refused to get scanned before, and they didn't know there was anything was wrong, and by the time they didn't have anything ready, and the baby was born with whatever defect, and they couldn't save it. So this is many poskim, Rav Vadia and Rav Asher Weiss, as we said, and many other poskim say, no, you have to get diagnosed, you have to get tested, because there is something you can do. Even though the Stipler and again Ruch Chaim and Zibushin supposedly say one shouldn't. It's better not to know.
But they may change.
That's exactly my point. So I have a hard time with basing a psak on the Stipler from 35 years ago. Medicine has changed so radically since then.
Go and try to tell the Haredi Tzibor that they have to change.
It's not to do with Haredi Tzibor. There's the different poskim.
Oh, and that's Rav
This is Bnei Brak. This is Bnei Brak versus other.
Rav Chaim will come out and say what my father said 35 years ago is not relevant.
Okay, so I haven't spoken to Rav Chaim about it. This is just what it's quoted b'shem Rav Chaim. That he said also like his father. That's how it's quoted. Again, I personally have not asked Rav Chaim, and I'm not going to. But and Rav Chaim himself might have changed his mind. I have no idea. But that's at least what's quoted. Okay? So back to Rosh Hashanah. So that Kilas Yaakov is going on the same idea almost of Tamim Tiyeh Hashem Elokecha. Don't look into it. It's better not to know. Leave it up to Hashem. It's too late at that point. Once you know you have to ask for a nace, it's too late at that point. Okay? So, but then he continues on and says exactly the same as Reb Moshe. He says, okay, so let's say we can't do testing according to him. We shouldn't do the testing on the embryo when the mother's pregnant. A, because we can't abort. B, it's better not to know. But he says you can still do premarital testing. And don't say to me, and he says, Yesh tanim shelo kidei lasot habedika. Better not. Some people say don't even do that. If anyone finds out that he is a carrier, he'll go nuts. And people do get very nervous about it. So it's better not to do the test. And therefore you should say, Shomeh P'sayim Hashem. Same idea, it's a different halachic concept. You should say, since the majority of people don't have it, you can just close your eyes and let Hashem take care of you. Same idea. Aval ha'emes, almost word for word like Rav Moshe. Ha'emes shebekal efshar livdok. It's so easy. And be proactive, and your kids shouldn't have chas v'shalom, a major genetic condition. Rav Moshe Steinbuch. And therefore he writes Ashkenazim should be Tay-Sachs test. And don't be silly and say, oh, Shomeh P'sayim Hashem. It's so easy, it doesn't go into the category of Shomeh P'sayim Hashem. Almost word for word like Rav Moshe, except when it comes to pregnancy, there, he says like the Stipler, that you shouldn't do it. It's better not to know. So we have to discuss the differences. Now this whole discussion really revolves around, obviously, a very different discussion, which is using medicine in general. I just want to spend the rest of today just speaking about medicine in general. There's a famous Ramban in Parshas Bechukosai, which speaks about the brachos and the klalos. And the Ramban says, we have a whole list of brachos, v'nasati shalom ba'aretz, v'shachanti b'sochechem. So the Ramban says on v'shachanti b'sochechem. The Ramban writes, and this is number 5 here if you have it, the Ramban writes that the ideal situation is if we follow the mitzvahs, what will be? That Am Yisrael, if we follow the mitzvahs, Am Yisrael will not need to follow teva, will not need to follow nature. And second line, and Hashem will prevent any disease from them. They won't need to go to a doctor. And they will never have to go and use the doctors and do refuah. And similarly he says, in the times of Nevi'im, people didn't go to doctors. Even if they did an avera and they got sick, they go to the Navi, and the Navi would say, why are you sick? You watched too much TV last night. Right? They're given what's the shorish of the machla. Rak b'navim, ke'inyan Chizkiyahu b'chalosa, just like Chizkiyahu HaMelech. V'amar kosav, gam b'chol yolo darash et Hashem. The pasuk says he was bad, that he didn't go when he was sick, he didn't try and figure out from Hashem what was wrong. Ki'im ba'rofim, but he went to the rofim. V'ilu hayadav ha'rofim nog b'hem, and if going to the doctor was a normal thing, matam she'ezkei ha'rofim, ein Hashem, rak b'avu shelo darash Hashem, what's it going to do with the doctors? Right? It's normal. It says no, the ideal situation is not to go to a doctor. That's what the Ramban seems to say there. And he quotes a couple of interesting Gemaras, and this is it's much longer Ramban, that seem to support that notion that it's better not to go to a doctor. So the first one is the Gemara in Brachos Daf Samach, which is number 6 here. The Gemara speaks about what a person should say before they go to a doctor. It's a famous tefillah, which not many people say. Every so often I remember. Not often, but every so often I remember. And the Gemara says, the Amar Avacha, what should you say? Hanichas la'akiz dam. If someone's going into bloodlet, as an example of what they used to do in those days. Omer, Yehiratzom ufanecha Hashem Elokai, sheyeh esek zalilu refuah v'tirpa'eni, ki el rofei neman ata, refuascha emes. Hashem, you should, not Dr. Shmo, you should give me refuah. Here's your story. Lefisha ein darkon, and this is the important line, Lefisha ein darkon shal b'nei adam l'rapos, it's really not the right thing for people to go to doctors. El Shanoga, what can we do? Nebuch. That's the minhag ha'olam. You can't break the minhag, right? You shouldn't really go to doctors. It's the minhag. We should really be davening to you. Says Ramban, you see, the ideal situation shouldn't be going to a doctor. You should try and find the spiritual root of what's wrong. Except, the Gemara continues. Amar Abaye, says Abaye, lo lema in shachi. No, you shouldn't say so. You shouldn't say that. The Tanya debate Rabbi Shmuel, because Rabbi Shmuel learns, and this is the famous Gemara that we know, V'rapo yirape, mikan shnitim reshus l'rofe l'rapos. The Torah gives permission to a rofe to do it. So don't say, oh, people shouldn't go to a doctor. No, there's a reshus to go to a doctor. So which one is it? So Ramban seems to harp on the ideal situation, which is, don't go. Number 7 is a similar Gemara, which the Gemara says, and again, the Rishonim have different pshat in this Gemara, but the Ramban understands this Gemara. The Gemara says, Kol hanach shani de malach Rabba. There were 2, Rabba and Rabbi Yosef were Nesiim, were the Rosh Yeshivas one after each other. So it says, Tatin shanin malach Rabba. Rabba was Rosh Yeshiva for 2 years. Esrim b'tatin shanin malach Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef was Rosh Yeshiva after him for 22 years. Tatin shanin upalga. Just one second.
One of them didn't want
No, I got it the wrong way around. What can I say? All the years that Rabba was the Rosh Yeshiva, he never even called a blood letter to his house. So Rashi has a whole pshat that he didn't want to infringe on the covet of the other one. The other Rishonim have simple pshat. Ramban quotes this and understands it means he held himself on a high madrega that he wouldn't call a doctor. No, I don't need to call a doctor. I trust in Hashem. Okay, so why do we go to doctors then? The Ramban says don't go to a doctor. So what's interesting is that the Ramban, the next Ramban, number 8 here, the Ramban has this... Because we don't want to pay. No, so the Ramban, number 8, the Ramban has a sefer called Torah Sa'adam. And this sefer Torah Sa'adam is his compendium. You can call it a lifecycle compendium. And he starts really from end of life compendium. He starts from Sakana and Refuah, and he goes to Hesped and Kvura, and all of Hilchas Avelos. So this is his compendium on the end of life, if you want. And the Torah, and there he writes in Shara Sakana, he writes, he says exact opposite of what he writes in Parshas Bechukosa. Exact opposite. Let's look at the Ramban, number 8. Why does the Torah tell me that a rofe, a doctor, has permission to practice? Lomar, to say what? So he gives one thing, and then he said, second thing, Shelo Yomu. The reason why the Torah has to tell me that, Shelo Yomu HaKadosh Baruch Hu mochet v'hu merape. A person shouldn't say, oh, Hashem made me sick. Hashem will make me better. She'ein dachon shebnei adam b'refuah osel shanok. Don't say, oh, no. People shouldn't go to doctors. They should it's just the minhag ha'olam. People should really go to Hashem. You shouldn't say that. But he's telling you should go to a doctor.
So which is
Whoa! Mr. Ramban, Rabbi Ramban, make up your mind here. In Parshas Bechukosa, you seem to say that, no, we should be the ideal situation. Don't go to doctors. Daven to Hashem. In Torah Adam, you write the exact opposite. And you say, don't say that. Exactly what you said in Bechukosa, you shouldn't say that. No, you should go to a doctor. So which is it?
Which was written later.
That's a great question. I don't know. I can look that up. That's a great question. But the Chida in his Perush on Yoredes, Siman Shin Lamed Vav, which is Hilchas Refuah, this is just before Avelis, as you can understand, one of these to the other. Just before Avelis is Hilchas Refuah, Shin Lamed Vav. So in the Birkei Yosef, he asked this exact question. Will the real Ramban please stand? Which is the real shot? Do you or shouldn't you? So he says there's no stira. No stira. Depends on who you are. Depends on who you are. The Ramban, as he writes himself in the times of the Nevi'im, woo! You want to be in the times of the Nevi'im, you're lofty on that madrega, fine. Yeah, if you're on that madrega, then you shouldn't go to a doctor, true. In the times of the Nevi'im, they had Nevi'im, okay. So go to the Navi. That is, the Ramban's talking about not us, not about Joe Schmo in our days. That's not what the Ramban's talking about there. What the Ramban for us is in the Sefer Halacha, Torah Adam, that's for us. In Parshas Bechukosa, that's talking about the ultimate brachas. If we follow the word of Hashem, that's talking about right. That's what it should be. No, that's what it should be, but that's not right. But Torah Adam is the real one. So now it comes out, and that's why he passes this way. He passes that everyone has to go to a doctor. He himself was a doctor. Everyone should go to a doctor. Yes. The Rambam, both of them. Yeah. We're going to actually discuss next week, maybe if I have time, in 2 weeks, a very interesting Ramban. Now, this is totally off topic. The Tshuva of the Maharit quotes the Tshuva of the Rashba, quoting that he was a Talmud of the Ramban. Quoting that the Ramban, he saw the Ramban, he heard that the Ramban assisted Goysha women doing abortions. And this is a huge discussion. How, why, which, when. Okay, so just to the point the Ramban was. Okay? So that being the case, for us common folk, in our days, everyone goes to a doctor. The Gedolim go to doctors. I don't know if there's anyone who doesn't go to a doctor. The Ramban's talking about an ideal situation. Yemot HaMashiach, when you have Nevi'im, okay, that's that situation. But that's not for us. That's not an Al Madrega. That's not an Al Madrega. I just want to tell a quick story. A very unfortunate story, actually. I was once in a course with a large group of people, a certain course, and a woman from who lives in Moshav Meiron told me the following story. She said she had somebody in her Moshav who was diagnosed with cancer. And this is Meiron, the Kever of Shimon Bar Yochai. And she decided, no, I'm not going to the doctor. Well, she went to the doctor to get diagnosed, I guess. But she's not going to go through chemo. She's not going to go through treatment. Why? Like the Ramban in Bechukosai. I'm going to trust in Hashem. And everyone, the Rav, and everyone in the Moshav tried to persuade her. Say, you know, that's not... No, I'm living right next to the Kever of Shimon Bar Yochai. I'm going to trust in Hashem. And the matzah was getting worse and worse and worse. And, you know, people called in Rabbanim from outside. This is not really the behavior for nowadays. This is The Ramban is the ideal situation, not for us. She said, no, I trust in Hashem. A few weeks later, she died. And I remember hearing this story as like, it's a very deflating story. But it really emphasizes what the Ramban, what we're saying, what the Chidah says. The Ramban, we're not on that madrega. We're not the type of people who should be saying, oh, I can find my spiritual issue and solve everything. We're not on that madrega. For us, that's the Ramban in Torah Sa'adam. We have to go to doctors. Like Abaye said, don't say we shouldn't go to doctors. We should go. Same as Abaye also, we should go to doctors.
I was just going to say, could be in that case they told her it's pretty hopeless, we'll try chemo.
You're 100% right. I don't know, obviously, the specific details. I just heard the story downstream.
And the cancers and their cancers.
100%. What stage? It depends what stage. For sure. And again, like I said, I don't know the exact details. But the point here is, we're not in the madriga of the Ramban in Bechukosai. We're the Ramban in Torah Sa'adam. Okay? We're supposed to not be too tamim tiyeh Hashem Elokecha. Use your common sense and do what you have to do. That's what refuah is. And this really brings up a whole further machloket in the whole definition of bitachon. So, the Madrega Sa'adam, the sefer called Madrega Sa'adam, is a sabam from the Vardak. He very much held like the Ramban in Bechukosai. If you look at the sefer, I think we have it here, Madrega Sa'adam. He very much held of the Ramban in Bechukosai that a person should live on that level. And he felt, and his brand of bitachon and mona bitachon was a person should live like that. Like the Ramban in Bechukosai. That is the way we're supposed to live. As opposed to many other contemporary Gdolim who felt otherwise. Chazon Ish felt very much otherwise. A person is supposed to do their hishtadlus. And if one doesn't have to look any further than the Chovos HaLevavos, the classic work on bitachon, and Shara bitachon, this is number 9 here, the last Mari Makom we have today. And the Chovos HaLevavos, Rabbeinu Bachye, right. The first Rabbeinu Bachye, right. And similarly we should say when it comes to our health and sickness. Of course a person has to have bitachon. It's supposed to be the daven say Tehillim. But at the same time, you have to do your ishtadlus to make yourself healthy. And use your common sense. Take medicine when you're supposed to. Don't be a super smart guy. Because Hashem gave us the mitzvah. V'rapo yirape. Don't have bitachon in the medicine, it will help. That's the only reason it works. As you know, some medicines work for some people, don't work for others. Have bitachon in Hashem, but you still physically, you have to do your shtadlus. You have to go to a doctor, you have to take your medicine, you have to eat healthy, you have to exercise, you have to do whatever you have to do. Ela b'shus sabori. But everything is done b'shus sabori. So our path is the path of the Ramban, and if I may say, not the path of the Madrega Sa'adam. The path of we have to do our shtadlus. So that brings us back to all this testing. We saw in Reb Moshe, we saw in the Chuvas Van Hagos. Also, when it comes to premarital testing, don't be a smart aleck and think, I shouldn't do it. Why should I do it? Nothing in my family. It's easy to do. It's easy to do it. Now, we're going to obviously have to discuss what about all the other testings, which are, as we go down the line, progressively more complicated, have more ramifications. So then we have to ask ourselves all the obvious questions. A, is there a risk involved in doing the test? So we discussed, as you mentioned, in certain of the tests, amnio and CVS, there are risks, inherent risks. So are there risks involved in tests? In the case of premarital testing, obviously there's no risk. Are there physiological or psychological risks involved? With all of these, there are potentially psychological risks, some more, some less. When a person finds out that, chas v'shalom, if a person finds out, chas v'shalom, that they're a carrier or the baby's a carrier or whatever. Are the physiological risks we just discussed? What can you do if you get a result? Can you do anything? Can you do an abortion if it's during pregnancy? What can you do? Is there any point in getting the results? So we discussed that partially now in terms of surgery, fetal surgery, intrauterine fetal surgery and things like that. But is there even a toelis to do the testing? And if so, what testing should be done? Is there a limit to how much testing one should do? And this is a very, very important topic which medical journals are writing about in the States at this point in time. On the Dor Yeshorim site, they actually have an article from, I don't remember which journal, a relatively recent article about how people are doing way too many tests that are necessary. because once you're doing it, it's a panel. You're giving the whole panel, and they're not all necessary, and it can cause psychological damage. I'm a carrier for A B C D E F G 1 2 3, but most people don't know that A B C D E F 1 is not such a major thing, and they'll go berserk and they won't have kids. So there's articles and there's a lot